Good afternoon and welcome to OGV Live. This is April. April normally means that myself and Decommission and the OGV team are bringing you decommissioning specific content, both in the hard copy magazine and in the live webinar. In the next hour plus, in the usual format from OGV events, we will be bringing you a combination of speakers, giving you an overview of the market in the decommissioning world, some talk around P&A, plug-in abandonment is critical element to whole delivery of decommissioning, and then we'll move on to a number of service companies to talk about what's working and what's not working in the decommissioning space. For those who aren't familiar with this person sitting in a hotel room in London still wearing a tie, my name is Sam Long. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Decommission, the trade association previously known as Decom North Sea. We specialize in end-of-life and decom, oil, gas, nuclear, renewables. This is what we do. The North Sea remains the go-to region. We are still seen as the kind of the leaders of what is decommissioning, including the whale space. And so the North Sea is also at a somewhat of a critical period. So I'm tempted to say that this conversation is very likely to be very focused on our own UK needs rather than the international market. But the crossover between UK and international is fundamental, and it is important for the supply chain. So you'll see a mixture of these pieces in the conversation in the next period or so. If you'd like to ask questions or put them forward, please do feel free through the usual mechanisms and chat, and we will pick up and run with those. This, as I said earlier, the hard copy and this webinar are in support of our own event held in April between the 19th and 23rd called Decom Week. Details available on our own website. My job, alongside that of one of our guests just shortly coming up, is to be kind of Mr. Decom. I'm a SPOD, kind of interested in the details of policy, applications, techniques, challenges, and opportunities. And so I'm hoping we can convey some of that into you now. Right, I'm going to open up, as I said, first part of what we're about to do now is our market overview. I'm going to shortly be joined on stage by Ricky Thompson, who's the head of decommissioning for OE UK, and Rebecca Allan, who is a Decom projects and interface manager with the North Sea Transition Authority, in other words, our key regulator for the North Sea oil and gas industry in particular. So I'll let them come on stage and they can introduce themselves. Hello, both. Could you please repeat what I've probably just said and then say something beautiful about your organization and decommissioning?
After you, Ricky.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Sam. I'm Ricky Thompson, like Sam said, head of decommissioning for Offshore Energies UK. So we're the leading trade association for the offshore energies industry, and I specifically look at all things decommissioning. And I guess part of my remit today is to give a bit of an overview, which will be mostly linked to our insight report, which gets released in November every year. So we'll give you a little bit of an insight into how we are trending towards this year's release in the Insight Report and which areas we're lagging behind in, which I'm sure Rebecca will give you some similar details as well from a regulator standpoint. So I'll hand over to you now, Rebecca.
Thanks, Ricky, and thanks again, Sam, for the intro. So as Sam said, my name is Rebecca Allan. I'm the Decommissioning Projects and Interface Manager at the NSTA. The NSTA is one of the regulators in the offshore oil and gas space. We have a role of licensing authority, and as part of that, relating to decommissioning, we kind of have a dual role, really. We are the regulator for well P&A, well decommissioning, obviously because wells are drilled under a license, but we also have responsibilities when it comes to decom cost efficiency and also on advising on alternatives to decommissioning, such as reuse and repurposing for other things or for continued use in the oil and gas space. So thank you, Sam. Back to yourself.
Thank you both very much for that. It's good to get the ball rolling. Ricky, as you said, you guys published the Insight Report with data that is actually collated through NSTA. We could potentially talk about the mechanisms for how that's collated, and then people like myself also make commentary into that space. It seems right, therefore, to hand the baton over to you, and maybe I'll give some global numbers and we can go from there. The current estimate for the UKCS is 40 billion of activity. That has come down somewhat from its initial estimate. And these are numbers that OE UK, ourselves in Decommission and NSTA are regularly on stage talking about. I was in London with some of Rebecca's colleagues talking about this very topic yesterday. So we're quite comfortable and used to talking about these things. Ricky, all over to you to kind of strip that down a little bit more and get into the specifics of what we see at the moment.
Yeah, I guess so. So we release an insight report every November, and the dates are quite important. So we'll release the 2023 data in November 2024. We did that last year, and we will release the 2024 data in November 2025. The reason for that is the stewardship data that we very kindly get from the NSTA is given to us around about sort of May time, and then we spend a few months doing some detailed data analysis to ensure that that all the numbers are correct and we're trending properly, and we check in with all our members and operators to ensure that that everything is above board and correct. So I guess to sort of highlight some of the trends, that the obvious one and what will be discussed today is the chunk that Wells takes out of our forecast. So Wells generally takes around about 50% of the spend in decommissioning. One of the key things that came out of last year's report, which is sometimes seen as a negative, but conditions do change, and which is why we do so much data insight into these numbers. So 126 wells were P&A'd in 2023, which was about 40% less than what was expected. However, 187, which will be the most ever, was forecasted for 2024. And then we're expected from 2025 onwards for the next decade to clear 200 wells. So that's a lot for any basin, and it's a lot considering some supply chain constraints that we have on rigs in the market at the moment. So alongside the data that we get from the NSTA, we do track the general market data to see what is trending and to see if anything is way out of step with what we're expecting to see based on the forecasts. We are seeing that data sort of trend a little bit below, but probably not as much below as it would be expected. But we are seeing a massive uptick in 2024 in terms of the amount of work that was done in 2023. Whether we meet the targets we're expecting we're not sure yet exactly. However, we are certainly trending up. Another one that's worth mentioning is subsea infrastructure, where we were expecting 2024 to see about 10,000 tons of subsea infrastructure removed, and that's a space that has had a step change in activity and seen quite a lot of activity in that market. Another thing worth mentioning is that OEUK's work breakdown structure is used to benchmark all of the activities across the decommissioning sector. So we go from all 11, which is project management, post-COP running costs, well decom, facilities pipeline, isolation and cleaning, topsides prep, topsides removal, substructure removal, topsides and substructure onshore disposal, subsea infrastructure, site remediation, and post-decom liability. So you'll notice me looking down. I promise there's no notes here reminding me what they are. But we track all of them and each of their buckets to make sure that we can basically provide the supply chain with what works are coming in which region throughout the next decade in our insight report and beyond that, if we have the information, and we try and track to see if we're on track for that and if we have the supply chain capabilities to deliver what we're expecting to do. I feel like I'm rattling on a little bit, so I'll take a pause there, Sam.
Yeah, the pause is good. So the work breakdown structure came out of work that was kind of collectively done, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. I remember it now. I've been doing decom for that long, unfortunately. I think there's a piece there. So I may cynically laugh at you going, is Ricky remembering all of these, or is he quickly glancing at his notes? But they are, as you say, we're quite comfortable with them. We use them in language between the three of us and parties quite commonly, right? We'll know what we're referring to when we drop them into conversation. I think what's worth sharing with the audience is, flipping heck, the rest of the world looks at that WBS as well. There are a few people who challenge it and say it should be a bit different, but it's a cracking example of work and standards that have been established in the North Sea that are broadly adopted elsewhere. And I think that's fair comment. Rebecca, just bringing you in a little bit there, do you want to talk about how the data comes about and how it's collated, or is that not something you want to address?
No, I'm happy to if there's an interest. So annually, the stewardship survey is basically, which is hosted on the energy portal, is opened and closed every year. That is the mechanism through which the NSTA collates data from oil and gas operators and licensees on a number of topics, and it's related to not just decommissioning and decommissioning costs, but also well activity, other activity, emissions, trying to think of other sections that are included in it, supply chain information as well. So it's a vast amount of information, and we're aware and obviously increasingly grateful to the positive engagement we have from industry when it comes to submitting this information every year. We're not ignorant of the amount of time and effort it takes for it to be submitted. I can assure everybody in industry that thinks it's tiresome, it's just as tiresome as that for the NSTA to check every year. But that is, the survey opens in, I believe it's November every year, and closes for final submissions at the end of February. And we have a month's intensive work in March to review it, go back with any queries, etc., before it closes in April. And that's the findings in. And the NSTA uses that data for basically producing all our annual reports and insights. From a decommissioning perspective, it's the main foundation for our annual cost report and our annual benchmarking report. But we also use it at a more, rather than just as well as publications, we use it at a working level. So the NSTA work with oil and gas operators, licensees, and supply chain to steward decommissioning projects to make sure that, where possible, people are planning and executing cost efficiently, and that we understand where the challenges are, and if there's anything the NSTA can do to help support or raise awareness or be more transparent. And so we use the annual data every year to help us reset our priorities and look at how we're engaging over the next 12 months.
So I'll jump in and add a bit more flavour to that. So I think it is important that supply chain understands how that comes about, because that derives the data that many rely on. We have a basin that maybe will come up in this conversation or maybe subsequent throughout the afternoon. We don't have a time-bound basin. There are other basins where activity is regulated and prescribed much more than it is. And by that, I mean there are geographies, Australia comes to mind, where they have a very, very transparent, predictable pipeline of work. And it's quite often a frustration that we don't have the same in the UK. I don't intend to open up a conversation to say, hey, should we change that or anything, because I think it's too complicated. There is the consultation going on today. For the audience, you are going to hear me mention that consultation time and time again. Surprised Ricky and Rebecca haven't even mentioned it to you. It's the current consultations from DESNEs are mission critical, really, for the North Sea in terms of future production, future licenses, and decommissioning as well. So if you're unaware of that, please do prepare your response via your trade association or independently. This is a global market that's $15 billion is the kind of number that I would normally put around. We are operating in a global space. Ricky, that uptick that's coming around the corner, the NSTA team are well aware of it around. We have to be careful that we don't stretch people and go, oh, it's going to be amazing, rush into it. There's this balance constantly, right? Is that the right phrase? I mean, are we ready? Are we positioned for the work that's coming around the corner? Or do the three of us have slight concerns about whether we're truly ready for it?
I think there is a balance, and decommissioning is global, and the assets are global, and the UK go first, and generally other regions look to us. I lived and worked in Australia, Southeast Asia, and Houston, so did Gulf of Mexico, so did Decom and all those places, all of which where we used the work breakdown structure, and all of which where we used the UK insights to see where the peaks in supply chain delivery are in the UK, to see whether or not we're going to clash with that. And that is why the sort of potential exporting of our expertise and our infrastructure and our assets need to be managed well. We obviously want to look after our own basin first and do the works here first. So we need to ensure that there's a clear pipeline of works. And I do think from working in all these regions, you mentioned Australia, that I would argue and say that there is a much clearer pipeline of work in the UK for the supply chain to see than there was in Australia, certainly when I worked there for quite a lot of years. So I think the UK are trying very hard in that space and making things transparent. And yeah, I think that the fact that we've always got to aim for a cost reduction, and the cost estimate went up quite a lot last year, which Rebecca, I'm sure, will clarify for me based on that comment. So we are pushing the supply chain to do the work. We're pushing the operators to get works done as quickly as possible, but then also trying to drive costs down significantly. So there is a middle ground there that we all need to reach, and we're all finding it quite difficult to get to that, I think.
Rebecca, you should, if you want to, we should pick up on that. I mean, the three of us here, our goal is to kind of overview. What's the market? What's the activity look like? What's coming around the corner? I think that's what we're trying to get out of this 20-minute block here. But the other two blocks after this are going to be very much supply chain orientated. And I will try and have that conversation because the balance is really difficult. An immediate one that comes to mind is rig count, which seems to just be going the wrong way constantly, no matter what the concerns of many professionals are in the sector. I don't mean to be overly positive, but Ricky raises a valid point there, Rebecca. And people may not understand that the cost estimate kind of went the other way recently because of inflationary pressure and other variables.
Yeah, that's true. Obviously it's not going the way we want it to, and for clarity, obviously we're referring to, I think you've both mentioned the figure of 40 billion. That was the estimate that was produced last year, based on the stewardship survey data and other factors that we have at our disposal at the NSTA. We're currently crunching the numbers for what this year's figure is going to be. So that's not something that I have to hand or would be able to share. But our next cost report is due to be published over the next couple of months in July. But generally, we're seeing costs are going up. It's not as low cost as it was a number of years ago. There are various reasons for that. Inflationary factors play a part of it. But I think we also need to acknowledge the fact that we have a track record in the UK of not delivering annually what we said we would deliver. We have the track record of deferment in a lot of cases. In some cases that's been justified, but in a lot of cases it hasn't. We have a significant backlog of work that we're still trying to get through. It is a balancing act, and I totally understand it. But we are in a position where all of the evidence and the market intelligence that we are seeing at the NSTA, and obviously, yourselves at OUK and Decommission have conversations with the supply chain and operators and other people as well. So I'm hoping that you'll agree with me here when I share the insights that we've got, is that we have no evidence that it's going to get cheaper if we wait. We have to act now. And I know I'm really encouraged, as you said at the start, Ricky, when you were doing your introduction or the answer to one of your previous questions, that this year we are delivering more than we have ever done, and that's really encouraging to see. But that needs to continue, because as you say, Sam, resources are leaving the basin. We're competing not just with other sectors but also with other industries, and also we're seeing more of the older rigs are being retired, and those rigs would be the best abandon the wells that we've got now, the older legacy wells. The newer rigs, while great and very suited to the job that they're designed for, are not necessarily going to be the best for well P&A, so are not necessarily going to provide us a lower cost alternative. So there is a balance, and it's one that we're particularly conscious of at the NSTA in terms of our dual role as the regulator for P&A, but also the fact that we do have an interest and a responsibility when it comes to cost efficiency. So apologies if I'm not bringing as positive a message. I think there's a lot of positivity, but at the same time, we also need to have a bit of realism as well, I believe.
I'm perfectly happy with the realism. At the end of the day, you are right. I mean, I've literally just had lunch with a bunch of supply chain folk just now. We've had the minister speak earlier today. This is the event I've been in London. And the current policy positions in the UK has created some negative downturn and some uncertainty into the market, and it's everywhere. Everybody you meet at the moment has question marks over what is their capital investment, can they retain their teams, how on earth are they going to get into the renewables, at what pace, and so on. So I was asked yesterday after our session yesterday about, what you're describing Decom as deeply embedded. I think it is deeply embedded in the energy transition, because the skills, the resources, and so on, you can't separate one element of our energy system and just talk about it as an independent function. But quite often Decom is treated as, oh, that'll just happen. It is really far, far more complicated than that. Rebecca, you may not want to wish to comment on the policy piece. Ricky, you and I are currently at the moment with our respective teams putting in responses to DESNZ's consultation, which does ask, should the regulator, i.e. Rebecca, have more power? It asks, what is the situation for the supply chain and what is the likelihood of getting through the energy transition at the current pace? I think that's really, really critical. Finding words for it is difficult. But Ricky, any comments in there about, finding balance in talking to our relatively new government?
I think the current consultation is critical. We've got live, obviously, internal consultation going on, so, and our members' response will be sent back, and NSTA are very heavily involved in that consultation. So I probably can't say too much specific on it, other than the detail that's went into the consultation itself, and the questions that it revolves around, and then the response from industry is very detailed and needs to be taken into consideration fully, because it's extremely important. It's the next major stepping stone in what we're all doing. So following on from basically the North Sea transitions deal, this is the next big step, and we need to get it right. So having everyone's opinion from supply chain operator, regulators, the whole UK, is what we need to do, and make sure that we're going to do this correctly.
I'm not going to disagree. The piece I think I want the audience to understand is, it's a 65-page document. If you haven't chosen to read it, just be aware this could be your last opportunity to influence primary and secondary legislation that impacts the basin, and that's why it's important. If you're a member of a trade association, speak to them, tell them what you think needs sharing. We are looking for evidence to support the situations as they are right now, and moving forward. A couple more minutes here, Rebecca. Anything I haven't asked you, or you feel
anything you haven't asked me?
Okay.
Well,
long list.
Obviously, as you said, I mean, the ongoing consultation, I can't comment on that. But at the same time, all I will say is just to echo what yourself and Ricky said about encouraging people to review, respond, take the time. We're looking forward to seeing the feedback, but it's obviously not something that I can comment on. I kind of wanted to hit upon something that you said there, Ricky. I think that, yes, obviously there's a lot of external factors and policy decisions and things going on at the moment that I know are very interesting and very important. But I think we also can't lose sight of the opportunity that we've got. You asked earlier, Sam, are we ready? I think that, decommissioning is so embedded now, as you say, Sam, that I think we are ready, but our opportunity to get it right is now. We talk about 40 billion and it's a massive number, but I think what we also need to really emphasise is that we are in the decade of decommissioning. From 2023 to 2032, we are seeing 50% of that total spend. The time is now to do it. The time is now to do it and get it right. And that's why it's good that we're no longer talking like we were a couple of years ago, as decommissioning is this thing that was going to happen in the future and we would get there. It's now, and we are delivering it now. We've got the expertise now. Obviously, we're just wanting at the NSTA to see that momentum keep going.
I think you've first up, you've hit us on time perfectly, Rebecca. So that's really good. I'm just conscious that finding balance in wording is really difficult. The supply chain is struggling right now, and I would be lying if I pretended the supply chain are doing really great and everything's awesome. Even operators are finding the current environment tight. We had a paper earlier today here in London talking about even INTOG, and the idea that we should be using floating wind into offshore assets is currently challenged in the current fiscal environment that we've got. So there's an awful lot up in the air. It's easy to think about negatives, but the truth is, I like your language there. Opportunity to get it right is now is good. I've written that one down. I think that's a nice reflection. Ricky, any final words before Hal politely asks me to move on to our next set of guests?
I couldn't possibly say any better than Rebecca did there in conclusion. So no, just thank you very much for having me along today, Sam.
Can I offer my sincere thanks to you both for your contributions and your input? And as ever, the three of us, we're always welcome to being approached by other parties, audience who's listening, who's watching. Thanks a lot. Right, so there's your overview. We have a challenging situation with some uncertainty in the UKCS, but we also have a backlog of work that's not going anywhere, has to be done, and is going to be executed by the supply chain largely on behalf of the operator community, which is a beautiful way of me therefore bringing forward our next set of guests to talk about plugging and abandonment, which, by the way, also seems to be increasingly being called well decommissioning. Choose which one you like, probably dependent on how long you've been around. P&A, at the end of the day, decommissioning in oil and gas is about the social license to operate. The industry was built out on the basis that it would decommission itself towards the end of operating life. That's largely what's going on right now. And so the fundamental ask by society of our industry is to make sure that we open the reservoir. We now need to make sure it's closed. That is what the art of plugging and abandonment is like. So we're going to bring up our next set of speakers. So that's going to be Joe Whiteman from Zenith, Allan Smith from JNS Subsea, and Willie McInnes from 360. I'm going to ask a new set of guests to beautifully introduce themselves, smile politely, and say loving things about their organizations. Joe, you're top right, so you win first, unfortunately.
Perfect. No, thank you for the introduction, Sam. I'm Joe Whiteman, working for the Zenith Energy. As you can see in the little box there, I've got Zenith Decom, which is a bit of an exclusive, a bit of a work in progress for our business. Been established for just over 10 years now. The first job Zenith took on was a 3-well wellhead recovery from a CSV. So we've been engaged with Decom from the very start, but obviously starting to realise now it's a core aspect of our business, something that typically supported the small operator new drill wells. That was the core of our business. The Decom is now the prevalent work in the UK sector. So I've been involved with Zenith for just over 5 years now. The past 3 to 4 years has all been Decom work in the UK sector. So currently working on a P&A planning project for a large operator and hoping to support them all the way through to execution. That's all for me.
Thank you, Chair. Willie, I'm going to use you randomly, or Will, or William, whichever.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon. My name is Willie McInnes. I'm a consulting and strategy director for 360 Energy. For those who don't know us, we're a second-tier service company based in Aberdeen that covers the full life cycle, everything from subsea to the export line, everything in between, covering EPC operations, wells, and product solutions. And we are very active in the Decom space. It's a principal part of our business. And part of that is our outsourced duty holder model for late life and decommissioning. So what does that mean in terms of P&A? I guess, Sam, is we see ourselves as enablers. So we are that unique offering where we can become the well operator, the duty holder for installation and pipeline, and become a single model to deliver on behalf of the operator. We think that's very powerful. It's something that's actually, we don't believe it now to be really innovative. It's I would say now in this basin, it's standard practice. So where the world that we're in now is we're actually going into the optimization of that model. Where do we take it next in terms of doing the heavy lifting for the operator in the Decom space? So our track record really, Schooner and Ketch in the Southern North Sea was delivered 21-22. That was 2 assets, topsides and jacket lifted. We have just successfully come off Heather. I think 2 weeks ago was the last trip. So that as an asset now in lighthouse mode. And you may have seen the press, we've taken over 3 of the Repsol assets as duty holder for installation and pipelines. So that's a real exciting project for us, where we'll take the ownership now of these assets as they go into their post-COP P&A program. So that's great for us. And we're also engaged in another major project at the moment. Had this been in 2 or 3 weeks' time, I think I could have mentioned it. Sorry, I can't break cover on that today on the call. But yeah, so I'm actually being seconded as project director on that project that we've been up and running since January. It's really exciting for us at 360. Again, I think it's the next stage of that outsource model. We talk a lot about co-creating. This is a great example that we'll be able to release about the new optimized version of decommissioning in the UKCS. So yeah, and thanks for your time this afternoon.
You're more than welcome. Allan, last but not least in any way, I mean, P&A is really, really relevant to what you guys have been doing at JNS for a long time now.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me and the company, my name's Allan Smith. I am the technical sales manager here at JNS Subsea. I've been with the company for just under a year and been in my current role for just under a month. JNS Subsea are primarily a subsea controls company, dealing mostly directly into operators supporting their controls infrastructure, manufacturing electrical flying leads, hydraulic hoses, dealing with topside controls, subsea control modules, which maybe begs the question, why is a company that's been heavily involved with keeping wells going in a discussion about decommissioning? So what we do in this area prior to plug and abandonment is we can help out with well integrity testing, perhaps on some wells that have lost comms to the topside facility late in life. Perhaps through umbilical issues, we can help with that. One of the things we do, we have an initiative called Legacy Locker, where we stock legacy subsea controls equipment, and we remanufacture, repurpose, and can help late life fields where procurement is an issue. And that comes into play with decommissioning when there's a requirement for flushing scopes, where perhaps testing flushing plates, for example, have not been seen since the commissioning days. And we can remanufacture, we can reverse engineer, and through Legacy Locker, provide a pretty flexible and speedy response to help with the flushing scopes, valve movements, etc., that are required prior to plug and abandonment. So that, in a nutshell, is our involvement at the moment at JNS Subsea, and we look to take that forward.
So I picking up on all three of you, the spod in me that I joked about earlier, I've been an SPE member for 25 years or whatever, right? I mean, there's something about out of sight and out of mind that applies to the whole North Sea industry, right? I mean, most people, what percentage of the population ever travel offshore? It's probably 1%, right? Or whatever it is, right? So first up, we're out of sight and out of mind. Worse than that is a subsea well. It's even more out of sight and out of mind. And then every well is subsurface, which just truly makes the architecture and everything else just alien to most people. But Allan, the points you're getting at there in terms of sort of Legacy Locker and Twist, which Rebecca's colleagues launched last year, which was the idea that we could develop a pan-industry database that said, here's the tooling required to access those wells. Could I get the three of you to just briefly kind of talk about, oh yeah, there's a bit of an issue here. Getting onto wellheads that are 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s is not as straightforward as the public probably perceive it to be without getting spod-like. Anyone want to tackle? I don't know if you all want to quickly comment. These are actually remarkably hard engineering tasks. Is that fair comment or unfair comment? Am I overexcited?
Yeah, well, I think Sam, Legacy Locker solves issues through late life fields, right into decommissioning, where, as I said, there's equipment out there that hasn't been available for a number of years and is required for decommissioning activities and keeping fields going late into life. And with the OEM of some of this equipment, they've moved on. Their equipment they're selling has moved on, new generations. They don't want to manufacture equipment that they haven't sold for 20 years. But we take stuff back from the seabed as well, and I think it surprised a lot of people. We will post decommission, we will take controls equipment back, we will dispose of it for the operator, which takes a bit of weight off of them. But we can reuse some of this equipment, and that solves a supply chain issue where we're cutting lead times from 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down to a matter of weeks. So these activities can happen efficiently, cost effectively, and in a timely manner.
Allan, you're reminding me, I don't know, we're 30 minutes into this broadcast. I think you're the first person to use the word efficient, which is a bit shocking, but there you go. Joe, how many hours disappear on engineering for antiquated kit or stuff that nobody's kept the microfiche from?
Yeah, it's a big issue, and it's a big blocker to getting work over the line. You know, companies raising budget to abandon wells is big enough as it is, but the uncertainty of whether you can get on and complete your work scope and who's going to provide that, especially if you have to, as Allan says, deviate from OEMs and get custom equipment designed and built for a job. Not something personally I've been involved with, fortunately, but yeah, I've colleagues I know that it's a huge hurdle to overcome. But fortunately, something that as a UK sector we seem well placed in. I think there's a lot of knowledge and there's a lot of exhaustive engineering that goes on to find these things, to answer these questions. And you know, the thing with Decom is it's a question that has to be answered. You can't just say, oh, it's too tricky to manufacture a wellhead connector for this variation. No, the well's got to go. So
there's almost
I think that's the benefit of us tackling Decom now, is like you're answering these fundamentally trickier questions, building that expertise, and companies are getting the go-tos of who they want to use and who can do that for you.
It kind of reminds me of the intervention market where we talk about 600 orphan wells and what are we going to do with them and can we get into them or not. I mean, there are outliers and then there are others that are okay. I mean, that's reflected in cost models, it's reflected in everything. We have an understanding of what it's costing us to do these things in the North Sea in general, across the SNS, East Irish and all of them. But there's still outliers that make it technically very difficult. Well, in your duty holder world, you probably get a bit more of that wider view of it all, but picking up older assets and cracking into them isn't easy, and then getting access into wellheads, getting on top of it after 20 years, even at platform wells, can be a challenge.
That's a huge challenge, Sam, and I'm actually going to defend the operator a little bit here, if that's okay. Although I'm the supply chain, there are challenges for the operator when it comes to the priorities of generating revenue and decommissioning. So you're absolutely right. What ideally we want is to get access to beds so we can get wireline to do well integrity checks, to build up that pattern and build up that evidence for the P&A program that starts to de-risk P&A. If you don't do that, then your contingency and your risk goes to potentially post-COP, and it adds cost down the line. So how do we overcome that challenge when we want access to a platform, we want access to wells, but the asset manager of that platform has got a different set of performance criteria to meet? That's a bit of the challenge for us. How do we achieve that? I think the supply chain has to do more to help the operator with that challenge. We've got to be more confident, more robust in our solutions, and say the consequences of the maintaining the revenue pre-COP versus the post-COP implications. And that message, and driving that message to the operator, where the challenges are, where the priorities are. I think we have to do more, be more confident and be more robust in the consequences of not getting after the discovery phase of de-risking P&A.
It remains, at 50% of the total spend in a global market that's worth $15 billion per annum, it remains the area that probably deserves the most focus. But as I jokingly said to earlier, out of sight, out of mind. For many people, they don't understand that.
Yeah,
Joe, I think.
Just to add to that, sorry, but if I'm an asset manager, it's a completely different budget. So that's a challenge. They don't see that budget piece. My experience with the operators is that the most senior decom person in the business is not as high in the IOC business where they should be to make those to apply that influence to the greater business case and economics. I think what would help us with the operator piece is having more senior roles within operators in the decom world that can actually fight that corner, Sam. I think that's an area that would certainly help.
Joe, you don't have to name names. You've currently got quite good knowledge of a operator in town. Hang on, I'm sat in London. We're talking about Aberdeen. Be careful now. I think Will's actually onto a valid point. You typically find an operator, once they've done it, then they're savvy to it. When they haven't done it, it's slightly uphill. Is that do you want to comment on that and what you're observing on a operator without naming?
Yeah, I think that's the benefit that an external company brings to an operator, right? It's as well as a well management company, you have your own experience. So for me personally, that's experience of Fairfield Dunlin, onshore UK sector as well, and other projects. And then the network of contractors we bring in are people they're connected to as well, right? So we understand a much broader decommissioning context than an operator might of their own experience. So bringing that into an organization and explaining, here are the things available to you, here are the models you might wish to follow, and delivering that to them on a level where they trust what you're saying, and you know how to deliver that to them in a manner they'll listen to as well, because each company is different. They've got a different kind of culture, different targets they're wanting to reach, different ways they conduct their business. So you've got to try and get the message across in the way they want it. But yeah, certainly trying to help companies understand, yeah, this is, decommissioning is not it's money going out the door, but here are the ways in which you can minimize that and make it as efficient or as suitable as possible for your needs. I think that's where companies like ours come into their own.
Yeah, I swear you just dropped efficient in there just to make me happy. There's a final kind of question to the three of you. There's some pain points here. They're typically contractual commercial. We're going to talk about those with Rebecca and her team at our own event in Decom Week. We're going to open up with a Wells seminar talking around some of that stuff. Is the future about cracking the commercials and the contractuals? Is there a step change coming? Again, Joe, in technology keeps coming up and up and again and again. What feels like it's next around the corner? P&A remains extremely challenging. Some of those wells are easy and some of them are real outliers. Do we need a step change or do we just need to get on with it?
I guess I can kick off. Is that okay? Yeah, I think it's more the next level, as I mentioned, about co-create. How do we make this process more efficient? And I think the operator, so I'm actually very positive about the future, Sam. I think we're going to see there's an increase of RA5s now coming into town, being Aberdeen. We're seeing that increase. There's been a little bit of paralysis. I think some of the numbers that Ricky mentioned earlier make sense. If you're thinking about some of the acquisitions and mergers that have happened in town, so that creates a little bit of paralysis. I think once we clear the decks of that, we're going to see an increase of activity in RFI. That's my view. And I think now we're going to move into this world of the outsource model being, whether it's well operator, well project management, duty holder, that's going to be a shift in demand. But there's going forward, I see that as a pattern. There's no real first, I think, any longer. It's about optimization. It's about doing that model better, slicker, more efficient, taking the weight off the operator. Allow the operator to be an operator and allow the service companies and supply chain to deliver decom.
All right, Joe, I'm going to come to you after I come to Allan. Allan, I mean, you're not a company the scale of 360. You don't try and do that breadth of things. You're much more specialist in what you do. Does it matter what the model is that brings it to you, or do you see some of those as more optimal for your business?
I don't think it matters how it comes to us. I think the important thing is, as a supply chain and doing what we do, I think it's been alluded to already that the one thing that's been known from the start, from the commissioning of these wells, is that they have to be decommissioned. And I think it's understandable from the operator's perspective that their priority hasn't been there for the last 20, 25, 30 years, but where we need to be placed as a supply chain is ready to help that process and kick it off when they're ready to go. However that looks, wherever it comes into us. And I think initiatives like our own legacy locker, companies' abilities to reverse engineer and solve legacy issues, alongside things like the NSTA's Twist database. I think these are all tools and services that can help the operators as they move headlong into decommissioning.
Joe, anything from you?
I think In the UK sector, you have a lot of multinational operators, right? And they're not, the UK sector is a little part of their business, and they could choose to invest here on Decom, and that money's out the door, or they might choose to invest in new drills in Namibia and Guyana, right? That's what you're up against. But trying to see our role as demonstrating the benefit of spending money on Decom, liquidating your work now while you're able to, while you're in control. And quite rightly, as Allan points out, this is work you have to do, right? You kick it down the road, you lose that control potentially. I think we're in a good position right now. So our job is to present up the work, make it manageable, make it achievable, demonstrate that it can be done, and you can be in control of it and have that example to then build on and improve as time goes on. So.
I need to wrap this section up and say thank you to all, but I will concur with that piece there, Joe. I appreciate the supply chain finding it hard, both from brownfield, greenfield, and Decom at the moment in the UKCS, and that the international work is very attractive. But ultimately, Decom requires a balance between cost, expenditure, and price for the supply chain and for the operator in order for it to happen. Make it too expensive, the operator won't do it. Make it too cheap, and the supply chain can't survive. And so the eternal search is for that balance. Thank you all very much for your contributions. I appreciate that. Thank you for giving us your time. I will say lovingly goodbye to you and move on to our next weekend.
Thank you,
Sam.
Okay, so do you know what? I went through a significant birthday last week, and it strikes me that I've done almost 30 years in this industry, which is starting to become a bit sobering. But there you go. The reason for mentioning that is some of those models we just talked about, the 360, the duty holder, or the integrated services model, or the shift away to more reliance on supply chain to execute on behalf of Decom, is a theme that has bubbled up throughout all of my career, where I have been in and out of Decom on a regular basis. So this next section is called The Future Decommissioning. I'm going to talk to 3 companies who are kind of developing new services or are very specialist in what they do in decommissioning, and kind of pointing the way to where we're going to next. So I'm going to welcome up my next 3 guests: Derek Littlejohn, Subsurface Manager at Elemental; Michael O'Neill, who's Head of BD at Decom Engineering. By the way, Michael O'Neill is sat in a departures lounge somewhere, so we'll see how well that goes. And then John McCall from Plan C. Gents, please welcome. If I could ask you to introduce yourselves, and then we'll go from there. Derek, you're top right. Oh, Derek's doing a lovely job of describing himself.
Hang on a minute. There we go. Sorry, couldn't find the thing. There we go. Hello, everyone. Derek Littlejohn, Decom Subsurface Manager at Elemental Energies. Brief piece in Elemental. We are a leading wells and subsurface operator across IOCs and NOCs, managing large and complex portfolios of wells globally. From a decommissioning point of view, we cover the full range between subsurface P&A planning, subsurface basic design, through to well engineering planning, and then into execute with our JV with Archer. So running the full range of the decommissioning space there.
Cool. Michael, come on, let's go to you, just in case that flight gets called and you disappear.
Yeah. Honestly, it started boarding already, but we'll make it work, I'm sure, Sam. Michael O'Neill, Head of Business Development with Decom Engineering. So Decom, we focus on supplying unique and tailored subsea cutting solutions for primarily the decommissioning market, taking what we have in our core business, which is chop saws, and adapting that and fitting that into new and unique challenges we find within the market.
Your business says it on the tin, eh?
It's nice and plain, keeps it simple, yeah. Make sure you're the top of most Google searches when you're looking up Decom work. It's nice and handy.
Hang on, Decom Eng, luckily it comes before
Yeah,
Decommission, so there you go. John,
Wow.
You've got a brand new entity, so feel free to introduce yourself and your entity.
Thanks, Sam. I'm from Plan C, which is a company that's trying to bring AI and computer modeling into the whole planning of decommissioning in the North Sea. So our background is in building models of complex industry operations, and then bringing AI in to that to try and find efficiencies, which you've been talking about earlier on this afternoon. So what we do is we try and bring in automation of development of plans, detailed plans for decommissioning, so that you can evaluate resource decisions ahead of time. You can react to changes in government policy or availability of resources or timing issues and so on, and recalculate those plans very quickly in order to estimate the best way in which you can carry these things out.
I'm going to kind of jump in with all three and then somehow find a way of reverting it back to where your businesses are focused. At the very beginning of my career, we would look at structures like Ecofisk or Valhalla or others. I just remember, don't know, ask me why, my focus was very much on the Norwegian market, but a lot of it when we did some of those early projects in the late 90s, early 2000s, where pretty much the methodology was reverse install, right? And so it was EPC in reverse. We're now 25 years further on. I'm talking to three individuals whose businesses are fundamentally designed in a way to tackle decommissioning. Is that a coincidence? Is that just an outcome? Is that a natural progression? Derek, go for it in terms of Elemental. You clearly are working in that integrated decom space.
Absolutely, yeah, that's where Elemental sees the real advantages of being joined up and having that full spectrum between the subsurface SSBOD piece, which is really quite a fundamental part of the full process, understanding your issues early on. I mean, building on Will's discussion from the previous session around about a skills base that for the future is a real issue, and it's something that I think we need to, as an industry, watch out for, is ensuring that there's a community of skilled and motivated personnel out there who can deliver these things, engaging early with the operators to help them understand their risks, where their key risks are, also where their efficiencies can be, and also where they can actually see themselves saving money is a huge part of what we try and do, and that early engagement is a key part of that. So it's trying to continue to drive positive change, and that also goes down to engaging with the regulator, making sure that we challenge the regulations and the guidelines for the future as well, so that we are, again, being as efficient as possible, not just accepting that what the regulator says is absolutely required. Do we go back and look for new technologies, new ways of understanding risk and managing that risks, so that when we deliver our P&A programs and our full decommissioning programs, they're done as efficiently and as effectively as possible.
Michael, you're extremely focused on the decom market. You're about to jump on the plane and chop, flipping heck. It's just all over my mind, isn't it? You're about to jump on the plane, head to the other side of the world to talk about decom market down in Australia. Your business is really, really focused on this. Does that feel sustainable? Do you need the international work to offset challenges in the UK market? Is that a polite way of putting it?
Yeah, I would say so. So we're pretty well rounded in terms of where we operate at the moment. You know, we're active on 6 continents. We've got a lot of cutting work going on. There's no shortage of decommissioning work going on there. You're right, Sam, most of our work is focused and tailored towards decommissioning activities. But even now, we're sort of finding that there are small niches in the markets that come away from the decom side that still require similar services. So as much as, yes, we've built a business focused around the decommissioning activity, and the longevity is something that we don't have complete confidence on. Obviously, we don't know how long this goes on for. But we're finding even a business tailored towards that, there's still spaces that we can fit into that can build and support a business. You know, I would say only maybe 50% of our work at the moment is actually decommissioning focused, and less than 50% of that at the moment is in the UK market. International business is crucial for a company like us. You know, we are, I would like to say, thinly spread compared to what we have been previously. You know, we're kind of operating about as far as we can at the moment with a relatively small team, but the need and the demand and I would say the willingness to take on small companies and work with us to tailor and look for new solutions is there, and it is potentially more present overseas. But the UK in particular is where we got our start, and it's where we'll still continue to focus.
I think John, you very much have established a business and jumped straight into decom. Is that by choice?
Well, we've just developed this decom capability, but we've been working in kind of marine optimization for a few years now, since 2017, in fact. And certainly some of the lessons we've got from that are exactly about that. There are huge efficiency gains to be made from collaborative efforts. And also you gain a lot from modeling, because these operations are very complex, and the typical way in which people with rudimentary tools, planning tools, solve these problems is by adding more resource. So lots of things are much more resource than they need to be, because of the complexity of the operations. But if you can build models of these and be able to calculate all of the risks and the things that might happen, changes to weather and so on, you can get a much better idea of the envelope and the sort of resources that you're going to need under circumstances, how you might collaborate with other people and so on. So getting that better insight is what's driven us into this market, because decommissioning is one of these things where it is really very complex, and it's not been done at this scale before, and so there's a huge amount to learn. So it's exactly where our sorts of technologies can be of use.
So here you go. We're almost an hour into this conversation. We've only just started talking about efficiency. Now we've just introduced the word collaboration. Derek was at pains, and I think he was right to say there's some positivity in here. And I think you've all got businesses that are focused on this because it's got activity in it. It is a global activity. I think one of the challenges is making sure that we can get on with it in the UK. Ricky is right, and Rebecca, their jobs are very UK orientated. Like yourselves, I work global. And so it's kind of like we have to find a balance. We have to sustain a supply chain. We are serious. I mean, for UK government, this is recognized as a key export opportunity, right? And so if we don't execute enough at home, we will lose that leading edge. That's a real challenge. And the other things that haven't bubbled up, carbon, John's just mentioned risk. These are all win-wins, right? Lower carbon, lower risk, better estimates, better cost control. Are they all built into what you all have to do in your respective businesses?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. From our point of view, again, as going back to the early engagement with operators, both internationally and locally, that allows you to optimize. John's talking there about obviously some key areas that you can optimize within using his technologies. And that's something we use and see every day. That the earlier you engage, the more you engage with everyone. Moving into CCUS areas as well, that's a real interest area in terms of growth, because they also need our decommissioning expertise. So again, that's something else that can be going out internationally, and that has more complexity to it than even oil and gas based decommissioning that we already do in the North Sea. So that expertise is absolutely vital. We need to continue to build on it. We need to continue to sell that as a viable career that can be exported outside of the UKCS. And we are seeing that. We are seeing people come to us to discuss decommissioning of these more these energy transition type deals. And it's a real learning curve for us and for the clients as well. So yeah, anything that can allow us to improve that capability is absolutely a must.
I feel a bit torn about this, and we're going to table it anyhow. I was recently in one of numerous conversations I have cross industry, and a party pointed out, we were talking about careers, and I was saying, we are struggling. We need professionals who are going to come into oil and gas for the next 20 to 30 years, no matter how much, whether we have new licenses or don't have new licenses. We're going to need people who are hydrocarbon capable for the next 20 years. Just to getting back into a well and abandoning it isn't going to help if you don't understand what a well is in the first place.
Correct.
But there are members of the supply chain and operator community at the moment who are also making people redundant. It's really challenging. And I think I wouldn't want to sit here and go, it's all going to be amazing, because I know people in my personal network who are being impacted by that at the moment. John, you and I had an interesting conversation yesterday where you said to me, we can help make this more efficient and improve things, and that'll be great, and we'll get on with things cheaper and easier. And I went, yeah, that's great. There might be some consequences of that. So there is a balance, but there's an inevitability about AI bubbling its way into this, and that capability of researching, improving. I don't know. You're the specialist on this, not me. That's an inevitability, and it's coming anyhow, right? That's what you're presenting to the market.
I think that's right. I mean, I think AI comes in as a game changer. So we're talking about here the workforce transition and so on. You're going to have some companies that are going to just continue doing the legacy work and so on, and their activity is going going to go down. You've got new entrants to the field in the new energy industries and so on. And then you've got other companies, many in the supply chain, who are going to make the conversion, and they're going to be doing the engineering that's needed for the new industry, and the stuff that's involved in decommissioning the old industry and continuing to have things running and so on. So I used to be in a former life the director of the National Subsea Institute at RGU, and we ran a program there which was looking at exactly modeling this energy transition. So building off some of the work that Paul DeLune's team did, but also looking at how do you manage that from a kind of workforce management point of view. And you can, with AI technology, build models of these transitions and develop models for companies where they say, okay, well, we're going to have to blend in retraining, recruitment, and so on, change the path of our workforce in with what we see as our future workload. So companies are going to try and manage, match the demand they have to the workforce skills they have. So they need to build in training as to how to do that. So again, it's somewhere where AI can help with that complexity. You can actually, automate the detail of that process to give you, okay, well, here's when you could be training people, and here's when you could be doing that, given on the sort of given the work demands that you've got. So I think there's a lot that can be done there to really just kind of scale up and bring a lot of technology into the kind of management decision-making processes that have traditionally been done through spreadsheets and databases and so on. There's a lot that can be brought in there to enable companies to make these kind of transitions much more comfortably than is currently happening. I think one of the problems at the moment is people are paralyzed by not having those tools available.
I think just I can't get rid of the word inevitable in my head at the moment. There's just this evolution that's going on. It's like decommission is like a problem statement that people can see the solutions to. We quietly chip away at it, but the macro level of it remains. It's quite difficult. It's an inevitability. It has to be done. The cost balancing it is quite difficult. Finding the teams to build it for the future. Michael, I'm going to throw a personal question at you, because you're the younger member of the audience here, if I can cast that aspersion on you. Yeah, thanks, Derek. You also know to go catch a flight, as the show's producers are reminding you and I in a text. Let Michael go. Let him go. Final question to you, Michael. Do your friends wonder what on earth you are doing working in the abandonment of old oil and gas stuff? Do they go, what the hell?
To be honest, I would actually argue there's a bit of admiration, sounds like a bold word, but a lot of friends of mine and things in Aberdeen previously being the probably still is recognised as one of the largest oil capitals in the world, in Europe certainly. Very few of them have actually managed to break into the oil and gas market as it is. So seeing what I do at a relatively young age and coming in, and my core to the industry is being decommissioning focused, and I've never been in the upfront oil and gas side of this. I've only been at the back end, and it's been a great opportunity for me to learn this as a primary skill, rather than being a case of I've had to adapt to this and this is an inevitable thing that's coming that I have to learn how to deal with. This is the core focus I've had. So the people that I work with, there's a lot of genuine interest there, and a lot of looking into how they can potentially look at something similar or get into that market. And there seems to be more access into that market within the supply chain than there is in the more oil and gas driven production side of the industry. So it's almost like the achievable goal at the minute. There's more innovation and more development going on in decommissioning, which then drives young people to come in and actually look into the market. And knowing friends of mine that have been at university and things, and even seeing some of them that have got higher education than I have myself, struggle to go in and push and get into that market, and then see how you can come in from the lower end. And my background's vehicle sales. You know, I came in from selling commercial vehicles, you know, and still being able to come in and make a pretty strong impact in this industry and grow a small company like Decom into an international business. You know, it's a great story to tell. So I really wouldn't have it any other way.
Hey, do you know what? We are going to run out of time. So I'm going to say thank you to you all. But actually, Michael, you've done a really, really nice job there of kind of some closing remarks that are positive, and I would concur with that. I'm going to say thank you to my current guests here for this final segment. I'm going to say thank you to everybody who's attended. Thanks to the OGV team for putting this on and for putting the Decom special together. And a final reminder from myself that we run our own event, Decom Live, in May in Aberdeen at our Doe House, and we would welcome to see you all there. Thank you very much for this session. We'll see you in a year's time. Thanks a lot.